I wanted to share with you another thought related to the current situation we're going through with the coronavirus slash COVID-19 situation. And that is the topic of what we call in Judaism emunah and bitachon. That means trust in God and faith in God. It's a funny thing because it's challenging, right? There are times that are difficult for us, and it's a little bit too easy to say, well, God's got a plan, trust in Him, have faith. It's not so easy. It's a difficult thing. It's a Jewish value, but it's one that needs to be cultivated. It needs to be built up within you. Because you don't always feel it, right? We don't always feel that God has reached out and done something good, even though I thought it was bad. There are times when things look bad and turn good, but there are times when things look bad and they kind of seem to stay bad. So in a time like this, where people are in high stress and we don't know what the next day will bring, we don't know what the next hour will bring, we need to try to see if we can work on that. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to me, meaning we all need to work on it. I was telling the folks in the Kollel, the other rabbis, I said, I'm really good at trusting in God when things are all right. That value, I'm really good at it when nothing bad is happening. I'm just great at it. It's only when the things that are a little getting rough, I'm not so good at it. I want to share with you that there's an amazing lesson in Psalm 23, a psalm that you've heard of, it's very famous, and I think sometimes when we hear Tehillim, aka Psalms, they sound like old-fashioned poetry that we don't really relate to, and who's going to sit down and read it? But the reality is, if you sit down and read some of it, there's something there. Particularly, I want to focus on Psalm 23 from King David. Now, you've heard of this one. It starts with, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." Sounds very nice. King David, he's saying the Lord is his shepherd. He lacks nothing. Everything is great. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to water in places of repose. There's 50 different translations of this, as you know. I'm just reading the one I have. Wow, King David is just looking to God and saying, wonderful, I lack nothing. He renews my life. He guides me in the right paths as befits his name. You think, yeah, King David, look, buddy, if I was the king, I'd also feel like everything's going right. Yeah? What right does King David have to stand here, preach at me, and say, oh, everything is doing wonderful in life. Thank God, God, you take care of me and everything is super. But you see, if you know a little bit about King David and his life, he has a far greater right to talk about this than you or I do. Let's talk about some of the things that happened to King David in his life. Well, King David was from a large family, and at one point the prophet Samuel was told to crown a new king because the king at that time, Saul, had acted in a way that made him no longer worthy of the kingship, and it was time to get a new king. So the prophet Samuel says, all right, where do I go? So God says, go to this guy's house, right? Yishai, Jesse, and it's one of his sons. So he knocks on Jesse's door and he says, hey man, good news. Your son, one of them at least, is going to be the new king. So Jesse calls out to his sons, come on guys, line up. And Samuel, the prophet Samuel's got his little jug of oil for anointing. And he starts walking over to each guy thinking, ooh, this looks like the guy. The first guy's really tall and he's, kingly. And he says, this must be the guy. And God says, He says, humans look at the outside. I look in the inside. Keep going down the line. And he's kind of holding his jug of oil, trying to get that feeling from God. Is this the one? Is this the one? Is this the one? And then he gets to the end of the line, and it's none of them. So he looks at Jesse, Yishai, and he says, got any more kids? And Yishai says, you mean David? He didn't even bother bringing David out to the line because there's no way it's David. David was rejected by his own family. He was they thought something was wrong with his lineage or something was questionable about him. Certainly if someone's going to be king, it's not him. Well, guess what? They bring him out. Of course, he becomes king. You think, all right, but now he's the king. Well, he's the king, except the other guy, Saul, is still the king, right? I can't say no one informed Saul he's not the king anymore. Samuel did, but he wasn't taking it too easy. And he started chasing David, trying to kill him. Now David's a refugee running around. He's on the run. Someone's trying to kill him. The irony of it is that it's his own father-in-law. That makes things a little more complicated. He's on the run. Finally, he becomes the king. And soon after he becomes king, his own son rebels against him, and he goes on the run again. He's a refugee. He's trying to escape from constant danger, sleeping in caves, sleeping in the ground in the rain. At one point, the situation was so bad that he had to go escape to the Philistines. So basically, this would be like Netanyahu being hated so much that he had to go to Gaza to escape. Literally that. So he gets there, and he says, hey guys, I know you hate me, but I'm King David. You know me, you hate me. But I have nowhere left to go. So they throw him in jail. At least David feels like he's safe in jail. But then the advisors to the king of the Philistines says, what are you leaving him alive for? That's King David. You know, he's famous. They have songs about him, how many Philistines he killed. So he says, yeah, you know what, let's go kill him. Now David realizes his life is pretty severe danger. He has to escape. Now what would you do if you're in that situation? You're in jail from the people who hate you the most, claiming that you're King David. He faked that he was insane. He started drooling on his beard and writing on the walls with his finger, hello, And so the jailers come there and say, oh yeah, King David, huh? King David, sure. They kick him out. We don't need another crazy person in our jail. Out you go. And he has to run off. He escaped by faking insanity. Did you ever get yourself in a situation like that? His own son rebelled against him. One of his sons raped one of his stepdaughters, and as a result, his other sons killed that son. Endless problems that happened throughout his life that went on and on. King David had a very troubling life full of upheaval. And here's how he says, everything's great. Now I want to read you the next line of this psalm. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the gate Salmoves, the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. I want to ask you, King David, the first three lines you said are, you are lying me down in green pastures and by peaceful waters. I thought you were in peaceful waters. What's this business about the valley of the shadow of death? Which one are you here? Are you in the peaceful valley of wonderful bubbling springs, or are you in the valley of the shadow of death? Which one is it? And the answer is in the end of the line. He says, Shivtecha u'mishantecha, your rod and your staff, hema yanachamuni. They both comfort me. Let me ask you something. What's a rod? A rod is a big, like a stick about this long. What's a staff? A stick about this long. So your staff and your staff, they both comfort me? Your rod and your rod? What's that supposed to mean? If you look at the Hebrew, shivtecha, a shevet, it's a stick, but it's one you use to whack someone with. A mishon is a cane, something you lean on for support. It's the same stick. Right? It looks the same. You could use the same one. You could take a cane. You know how they have in some countries, they have something called a caning? To hit somebody, they cane him. Well, isn't a cane a good thing to lean on, to support you? Well, it could be, unless you whack someone in the head with it. King David is saying to God, this stick, no matter what you use it for on me, they comfort me because I know you're with me. I know that everything that happens is from you. This stick is the same to me. No matter what you're doing, I feel value in it. He says, you spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. And his final line is, only goodness and love, achtov v'chesed, or kindness, will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for many years. What he's saying is, when I have this attitude that everything is for the good, I look behind me and only good things are running after me. How does he do it? I don't know. How does he do it? Only his hairdresser knows, right? King David has this attitude. He starts out by saying, I want to explain something to you. I'm lying here in green pastures. Even though I'm in the valley of the shadow of death and God is banging me in the head with his rod, I know there's a reason for it. I know there's a purpose. I know there's a greater purpose. It's very difficult. This type of thing is not easy. There's no simple solution of how to do this. I think perhaps one way to get started on it is when we find situations that we initially thought were bad and we find the positive in them, we can build this up. There's a story in the Torah where Jacob is living in the house of his father-in-law, Lavan, and he's married to Lavan's two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And God comes to Jacob and Yaakov and says, time to go, time to leave. You've been here long enough. So Yaakov comes to his wives, Rachel and Leah, and he says, listen, you know things aren't going so great with your dad. He cheats me a lot. He's not the nicest guy to me. And, the kids are getting older. I think it's time to go. And besides, God said, let's go. And the wives say, you're right. It's not so good here with him anymore. You're absolutely correct. And now that God said we should go, we should go. So in Lev Eliyahu, Rabbi Eliel Pian points out, what kind of weird conversation is that? God said go. What are you saying? It's pretty much a good time to go now, and things aren't going so well business-wise. Oh, and besides, God said we should leave, so I think we should leave. And that's the first thing you should say. God said we should leave. And in fact, the rest of it is irrelevant. Just go. And he says what's going on there is that what they're showing you is that there are times when you have to do something or experience something because God said so. And you take that opportunity to find the positive. They knew they were leaving. God said go. But in their discussions about it, they looked at each other and said, let's count the positive things that are coming from this. When something is difficult and it's starting, it's not easy to find the positives. It's not the right time to count the positives. When someone's in great stress, and I want to emphasize, this is not how you handle someone else who's going through great stress. We don't comfort people in stress by saying, look at the bright side. That's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that you don't try to comfort someone when they're in the grip of the tension and the stress and the anguish. This is a post facto sort of growth method that after something has been experienced, you sit down and take stock and you look at some of the positives. And the truth is sometimes the positives don't show up for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Jewish history is very long. World history is very long. We don't know. We don't know God's plan, and we don't know what God wants from us or the world. We know that God hopefully, is very soon going to bring Mashiach. We know he's going to bring Mashiach one day, but in the end, if we can get ourselves to a place where we can trust God and that we believe that everything that happens is his part of his plan, and that I don't sometimes get it. I know it's painful. Painful it is, but meaningless it isn't. Chaotic it isn't. And so if we can get to that level, this level of King David, we'll feel like even though we're walking in the valley of the greatest darkness and the shadow of death, there's a comfort to come from it. There's something valuable that we'll get from it. We don't know what. It's hard to know. Sometimes it takes years, But even that thought should help you just going through it. While you're there in that particular experience, it should help you feel like there's something behind all this. There's meaning to it, there's purpose to it. And it gives you a way to make it through some of these times. If you can build it. I'm not saying that you can, like I said at the beginning. I struggle with it, we all struggle with it. It's a recommended course of behavior. It's not mandated. It's hard, you can't mandate this type of attitude. Right? Some people are just born with it. But hopefully if we take this lesson from King David, we can learn from it, we can grow from it, and it'll help us get through this type of time.